Great. I'm here today with my colleague, Krista Coronado. Krista, I'm wondering if she's in the control booth running the show, and I'm halfway across town, but we're working together virtually. Welcome today to our session. We thought it was a captive title, EBRI Peasy, because it is pretty easy peasy. So I'm Heather Turngren. I work with Minneapolis Adult Education. I wear many hats, as you all do, in my program. I am the distance learning coordinator along with my colleague Amanda Headley, and we help support teachers and students with platforms for distance learning. And I am also a HSE or high school equivalency, aka GED reading teacher in the evening program. And I am so thrilled to be here presenting with my friend and my superstar, Krista Coronado.
Hi, everyone. My name is Krista Coronado, and I also work for Minneapolis Adult Education. And I have been with ABE Minneapolis for quite a few years, and in this role for the last 6 or 7. Student Learning Interventions Coordinator. I work with students who have mental health conditions, learning disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, ADHD, just having access and accommodations in our program and support teachers with those students also. And then I'm the STAR EBRI coordinator, and I work with wonderful reading teachers to help implement and make those strategies and routines successful in their classrooms. So welcome. Our objectives today that you can see on the screen is that we'll identify reading strategies that can be used with pre-GED HSE students, determine reading routines to incorporate into the pre-GED HSE classroom, and locate reading resources that can be used for lesson planning in the pre-GED HSE classroom. So welcome.
Krista, I just wanted to say, we hope that these will put the spark into your reading routines.
Yes. All right, so we have a poll up, and just like to hear from you in the chat. Depending on how we respond, we don't want to go into things that are you are all familiar with. So how familiar are you with STAR? Or I say EBRI, most people say EBRI. You can say it however you want. Good reading strategies.
So yeah, so please choose a number that corresponds with you. I see some people are choosing the number 1, and welcome to those who are STAR trained. I myself am STAR trained as Krista. We went through the STAR training program a few years ago. Some of you are putting in 3, so you're new to this, and that's why you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm wondering if anyone has participated in that EBRI study circle. So I don't see any 2s, but maybe we'll put a plug in for some of those EBRI webinars coming up. So we've got various folks here. So welcome everyone. So I think we have a lot of new people to this, Krista, which is great, because that's what we were kind of anticipating, but not to dismiss any of you who've been through STAR. We're hoping that you can see some of these STAR strategies and bring them back into your classrooms.
All right, so we'll get started here. So just first of all, just want a definition so that we're all on the same page. And this all comes from Atlas's, their resource that you would use in the study circle, and also much of the STAR training that Heather and I have both gone through. So evidence-based reading instruction is a set of promising practices proven to increase reading achievement for a particular student population. For our purposes, we are really looking at students who are scoring in a reading level of usually grade 4 through 8, just for today. But EBRI instruction and routines and strategies do work across the board with ELL students and with students who English is their native language or most used language. So the rationale that we have in our program and why we use STAR and EBRI, because it positively influences the following things you can see on the screen. This was written by Marn and I believe someone else, can't remember off the top of my head, about the Minnesota STAR project. And one thing that I think about when I was STAR trained, how important it was for me as an ELL focused teacher at the time to get good reading instruction. And it gave me confidence to teach reading, especially for those 4th grade through 8th grade, you know, where a lot of students were getting stuck. I was teaching transitions. So for like upper ELL students who are moving into pre-GED or GED classes. And the STAR has really boosted my confidence and knowledge about reading, and something that I felt like was lacking in my previous education. It also gives students confidence in reading skills, which is huge. We're going to talk a lot about that, about engaging students and having them be such a part of their own reading building skills. Student level completion is measured by the TABE, and student persistence, again, with classes and instruction. Having students engaged in this process as individual readers we have really seen as a very important impact on our students. Katie, we can answer that question for you in a little bit. So these are the reading components that we talk about when it comes to EBRI or STAR, and the foundational components of alphabetics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. For today's session, we're not getting into alphabetics because Heather is an experienced HSE, pre-HSE teacher, and generally, if a student is still struggling in those advanced alphabetics areas, we as a program don't serve them in the same way. So a lot of times those students will be either in our ELL 6 class, or we've had them in our pre-HSE and HSE classes, but we've noticed how they're a struggling reader at that point then, and we would treat them differently. So they're defined here, and the teaching purposes, I won't read all of those for you, but you can go back to that. And each of these topics are covered when you do an EBRI study circle, and they're heavily covered when you're in STAR training. So just another plug for the webinars that will be coming up. I think they're about once a month starting in February or March, and Mar and Frank will be doing those, and you'll learn all about the teaching methods and strategies. Like I said, we're focusing on the fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension today. All right, so the EBRI practices recommended for ABE is these following, and we're really focusing our time today, and in our program, Heather and I working together to conduct diagnostic reading assessments and use results to plan reading instruction with the teacher, maximize student or learner engagement in reading instruction, and then organize routines based on need and monitor their effectiveness and adjust as needed. Heather and I have been doing this together a really long time, and we have seen the results, and you'll see actually some student feedback also from using STAR and EBRI practices and routines in the classroom. All right. We're going to jump into the DRA, which is Diagnostic Reading Assessments. And the wonderful thing about Atlas and all the work that Marn has done over the years to improve reading, teaching and learning for teachers and students in Minnesota is available through Atlas and on the website. And I have been doing DRAs for quite a long time, and would just want to share with you a few things that you can do if you're online or in person to make sure that you're giving that diagnostic so that we can identify the needs with students. So we have another poll here. The rationale we have for doing the DRA is that we can, with struggling readers, identify their specific needs and plan according to their needs, not just making general claims about what students need for reading. So have you done the DRA or diagnostic reading assessments? Perfect.
And Krista, I see some 1s and 3s in the chat. So some people are doing those. And that is fantastic, because I'm just going to do so many props to you, Krista. I'm the teacher and I can't do it all. So without having a person who can coordinate those diagnostic reading assessments, so when the students come in my class, I can know exactly where I can support them, instead of trying to juggle that, not while I'm teaching, but after teaching, it couldn't happen. So great. These are going to be some great strategies that Krista will show. She's the one in our program who does the diagnostic reading assessments, or the DRA, for learners entering the program, or entering my classroom, not the whole program.
Pre-COVID, I had a group of, I had 2 volunteers who were trained and worked wonderfully with students, and we had a great system going, and many teachers who were involved in our START classes, or were EBRI trained and would use some pieces of the DRA to plan lessons. But it's just been me since we went to COVID. Both my volunteers said no thanks to being virtual or learning something new. And so it's just been a great experience to keep up these DRAs, especially for the teachers that use the data to drive their lessons and help in their planning. So I didn't like that. Okay. So, oops, I think I skipped a page. Just some strategies. We've been doing virtual DRAs, even with classes back in, we're both online and in person in Minneapolis. Heather is only online again as of her January session. And so we make appointments with students, and I just use the platform that we're using, which is Schoology conferencing, and I test the students through that. And so you'll see a resource at the end of this session, but also the end of just this section here. And everything is available through Atlas, and the PDFs. I mean, it hasn't been much prep work for me to be able to continue with the DRA now that we're online. But the first step is getting trained. And I know that that's part of the EBRI study circles and probably the webinars. And I am happy to share any resources with you all if you have questions after this too. But I do talk and look through SID to see what their most recent assessment is. So I'm looking for a TABE or a CASAS score that gives me a good idea of where to begin, so I don't start too easy or I don't get too difficult when it comes to giving the student the reading material. I do chat a lot with the teacher just to get some good background knowledge about the student, especially in the times where we weren't testing and didn't have that information for placement as easily. And the teacher obviously has a greater rapport with these students, even though I'm meeting them for the first time virtually. And so always checking in with a teacher just to see what information you can gather. I greet students with my video on. Obviously, it's reading on a screen, so I take that video away pretty quickly, but I want them to know that real person existing, wanting to hear about what is happening for them in their reading areas. I ask a lot of questions about where they've gone to school, if they've gone to school, how long, all these different things, just to get to know them better, and then also to provide the teacher a better profile of this student. So sometimes Heather meets them the first time and I'm giving them a STAR or a DRA, a STAR assessment right away. So I explain the why and the how to students, and you'll see in the video next. I think it's really important for them to understand that we care about their individual learning needs. I think it's good motivation for them and them to hear, and that we're engaged in this process with them. We're not just looking at a reading test score like the TABE or even their GED ready tests, that we want them to build the muscles of reading so that they can understand everything they're reading. And because we're doing it virtually most of the time now, I just make sure that the students can see the screen, that they know how to zoom in. I can zoom in for them also, but that their microphone works. I've had students show up and want to do the DRA in a chat. And I say, well, it's really important for us to hear your voice, and it's an oral reading test. So it's really important in that way. I guess you could do it on the phone, as long as they have the materials with them, but I just make sure that all the tech things are happening for them too. I think we will ask about, have you done this before at the end here? Because I'm really curious. So we did a little video of me testing one of the students, and this is Libya, and she has a TABE score of a 478. So like I said, that kind of gives me an idea. You'll see that I kind of skip through some things and where to start and begin. The tests for me do build on itself because I just find out so much more information as they're reading. And it looks like she did not receive her diploma in her home country and is currently with Heather in online classes. So I'll just play this quick for you. Please, if you have any questions, let us know in the chat. All right.
All right, so Lydia, nice to meet you. So tonight we're going to be doing the STAR assessment, and that way teachers know you as an individual reader better. And it's 3 different parts that we can look at your individual reading needs in the area where it's individual words, where it's words in paragraphs, and making sure that you can read words accurately in a good amount of time and speed. And then the last part is comprehension, where you'll read something silently, and then I will ask you questions about it, okay? Okay. So we use this information not only to inform your teacher of your individual reading needs, but to put you in a small group where you can practice those things too and build those skills, okay? Okay. All right, so this first part, like I said, is just individual words. And I'm going to skip through a couple of these lists. Concentrate, development, material practice. Good. And this list, please. Contribution, oh my God, I know that one too. Contribution, convenient, individual, acknowledge, volition. And this list, please. Optimist, reputation, urgent, prescription, confidential. Can you say this one again, please? Optimistic. This time, I'm just going to be listening to you read accurately at your normal pace and just getting to the right assignment here. We're going to start with this one. So I'll have you read the title, and then I will flip the page when you get to the end. And this particular story is about deer and how they can be a problem. So whenever you're ready, I'm going to mute myself. Okay. Bambi's mother and hunting, level 2, parentheses, 2 slides. Bambi is a children's story that was made into a Walt Disney movie. In the story, Bambi is a baby deer who plays with other baby forest animals. When Bambi is almost grown, a hunter shoots Bambi's mother. And Bambi goes to live with his father. In real life, deer have caused many car crashes. This time we're going to do comprehension. So this time you're going to read it on your own, silently. Okay. And then I'm going to ask you questions about it. So you'll still have it in front of you, but try to remember the main idea and the details. So when I ask you questions, you don't have to reread it. Okay. Can you make it a little bigger? My eyes are no good. I have glasses on though, but they're just cheaters. Okay. So are you on a computer or on your phone?
We'll pause it there. And so that's just a glimpse of the DRA. When you do a study circle or you are in STAR training, you get lots of examples and you go through and you score them yourself and all of that. But we just wanted to give you a little glimpse of what it's like online. And Libya actually did just great. And she actually wanted to know, many students asked, what's my score? What's my score? And I really try to emphasize with them that this is information needed for their teacher to know them as an individual reader. That way that when they're put in the small groups, which Heather will talk about in a little while, that they know it's for them and based on the needs. And I usually try to give them a compliment, a strength, and then one of the things, that they'll be working on. It's my delight to do this because I get to know students in a new way. And then I know that it will help Heather with her planning and group forming.
And you do it so well. I just want to let you all know, because Libya came to my classroom, and in a small group, she told me, Heather, you won't believe this, but you were my teacher about 20 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, I've been teaching for a long time. But she was only in my class for one day. And apparently she learned how to say refrigerator in my class. So now she's back some 20 years later. And for those of you, I'm thinking you, Susan, you remember Layman, and that is where she learned how to say refrigerator. So she's back in the classroom, but she did come back saying, what's my score? How did I do on the test? And I have to reinforce, it's not a test, it's an assessment. And there's no score, but it just tells me what group you go into when we do fluency groups and how I can support you.
So like I said, all these resources are available. You don't have to do much prep to be able to give the DRA online. And I'm happy, like I said, to share any of those resources and more strategies that we've done to make sure that we are assessing our students. And so those are attached here. And you'll see those in our resource guide also. Any quick questions?
Well, I see in the chat that our colleague, Stephanie, she's not very familiar with DRA, but she thought the video was helpful. Susan remembers those good times at Layman. And then Kirsten, who went through STAR, she knows that those comprehension texts are only available. You need to contact Christine Kelly. And part of that is because of the nature of STAR. You need to go through that, but I think it works. Yeah, and the alphabetics and word recognition are available right now. And we like to think students at this level should not be focusing on alphabetics. We need to be focusing on fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension.
All right. Fluency strategies. No other questions, it looks like. And Susan just texted out for us. Make sure I'm on the right slide there. I think I did go back one. Sorry.
Oh, you're spot on.
So fluency, this is why we do it. Heather kept saying she was going to play our little song. This is why we do it.
Yeah, but you sang it. I don't need to play it.
So we teach fluency and we tell students this and talk about this a lot so they can read most texts smoothly with ease, efficiency, effective phrasing, and some expression. This kind of language tends to work for our ELL students best. They want to be fluent readers. They want to sound fluent. They want the right pronunciation. And so this is an easy way to engage those students in this process and why we're doing what we're doing. Like I said, it does help ELs with pronunciation. It helps native speakers with confidence. I have found so many native speakers, English schooled students who just don't have the confidence reading out loud. And so we emphasize and work in a lot with oral fluency and reading out loud. And I think the best way to engage a student in why we're doing this is letting them know that When you're a fluent reader, once you're a fluent reader, you're not concentrating on reading the words, you're focused on the meaning. And we all want that. We want better comprehension. We want to be able to read with ease and be able to understand. All right, so another little poll here. Do you focus on fluency in your pre-GED HSA classroom? Oral fluency.
So then you can just put into the chat what number might correspond best to you. Is fluency a focus in your class? That would be a number 1. Number 2, there is a little focus on fluency. Or number 3, there is no focus on fluency, and that's why I'm here. So I see various levels. I see a 1, 2, 3. And so I see 1s for a higher level, 2 and 3. This can be difficult to ask our native English speakers, especially, to be reading fluently, to be reading out loud. I let them know that it is a skill they'll need for college. It helps them in many professional skills. But also, I think, Krista, you'll verify that they'll come to us and say, no one's ever asked me to read out loud. No one's listened to me read before. And they appreciate it within that DRA and being part of the classroom where they can take part just like everyone else. Would you agree? I see you nodding.
Yes, I would agree. All right.
So some of the fluency strategies that I focus on in my classroom, again, we establish classroom norms. So I let them know that only the teacher or the volunteer corrects pronunciation. And I like to bring humor in my classroom, and I tell them I'm paid for that. So let me get paid for what I do. But it also is not allowing someone to come and read over another student. It is a classroom norm, and students, after a while, they all agree on that. All students also participate in some sort of fluency practice in class and in small groups. I've had students come in, and especially our native English speakers, saying, I don't like to read. And then when they hear everyone else's reading, they open up and they're like, oh, this is accepting. We all can read together. Of course, this doesn't work if their microphones don't work, but we've tried to figure it out in an online classroom. And I have students who are blind and visually impaired, and we find a way for them to participate as well. I build daily and weekly routines that focus on fluency. We're reading out loud every day in some form in our classes. I also reinforce the components of EBRI or STAR. So when I go into reading, I explain why we're doing this to let them know for themselves, but I'm also teaching so many folks who have children who I don't want their kids to be struggling readers either. So perhaps they're bringing this back home for their children. So model fluent reading in class with students. You could do echo, which is repeated reading. I say a sentence, you say it back. We could do choral or group reading, which happens a lot. I'll read a paragraph, you read a paragraph, another person reads a paragraph. But you could also do collaborative, small group reading. Each students are reading a paragraph differently. Excuse me, I misspoke when I talked about the choral. That's where the whole class is reading along with me. I also encourage students to focus on fluency and comprehension at the same time. And I went through STAR and it was not encouraged, but that is really a buy-in for our HSE students. I don't want them to think, oh, all I do is fluency. When am I going to get to comprehension? So we found a really fantastic way to bring both in, fluency and comprehension. And it's driven by doing that DRA. So if there's any way you can get those sorts of assessments, you will really know what your students need and how they can work together in groups. Do you want to add anything, Krista? I think we got those classroom norms and routines. And what I'll show you is just, my classes are built on routines. So I build routines. Fluency is not just for our volunteer-led fluency groups. It's also used as a comprehension strategy to reread. So this is an example of what I put in my online class. I also do it in person. I model it by reading a paragraph, and then I'll ask a student to reread that paragraph. And I do it as much as the time allows. This is so my students are hearing a fluent reader model, how to read. I also might point out that I pause at a comma, I stop at a period. If I mispronounce a word, I can go back and it's all right. So I do all of that in the classroom. And again, it's those routines. I have a student who told me that when she hears me read it, she'll turn off her sound when the other student is reading a paragraph and she's reading out loud at her house to practice those fluency skills. I thought that was an amazing strategy, and she shared it with other classmates because she has really been increasing her fluency. Another routine that I focus on is, if you want to go to the next, is I have consistent language about fluency groups. So we do fluency groups every Tuesday. The students are anticipating. I use this information so that they know what to do in the fluency groups. I let them know that they should go only to the group with their volunteer's name. In person, it was pretty easy because I could say, you're going over to that table, to this table. Online, it's going into different breakout rooms. I also let them know they need the norms of muting their microphone while they're in the group unless they're reading, and that the volunteers will read aloud, but they might not read aloud every paragraph because part of the fluency process is that the students are going to be reading. And I always say, please give a shout out to our amazing volunteers, pointing out that the volunteers have all been doing this for a number of years and have been trained. Although they're not teachers, I call them teachers in the classes. So again, we have these norms, and it is just so much easier when we have norms. Some other norms that I have is within our fluency groups that we'll show you a small video of. I let them know that all groups are reading the same passage. I might not tell them that it's at different reading levels because then students want to know which group is the best group. And I don't want that. So this norm that I'm showing you is just for you teachers. I happen to use News ELA currently because I can get differentiated levels for the HSE or GED topics. And then I encourage the students, yes, we build on fluency, but for you to take that high school equivalency exam, you need to be reading independently. So I embed all of these into our learning management system. So you can see the RW there means it's a ReadWorks passage. So students can go on and do that work independently. And some of them are readings that we have done in class, and others are readings that are independent of fluency. So I like students to know that, because they all want to know, what are they doing in the other group? What are they reading? And if I point this out, then they know, oh, we're all reading about the Declaration of Independence. So it's, again, bringing in those strategies and routines. Yeah, Stephanie, I agree. It really helps students to focus on what they're doing in class because they know what to expect. If I miss a Tuesday and the volunteers aren't there, I hear about it. Another routine that I have is students always work in the same fluency group. I'll be honest, these groups are a little large for me. However, I lost a volunteer who wasn't able to come back this year. So in my second class, it's a really large online class. And so I have students differentiated into groups. They don't know it, but I do it because of the fluency level that Krista determined doing that DRA. So there's a group that works every Tuesday with Ivory, another group works every Tuesday with Mary Jo, another group works with Becky, and then a group works with me. I am having our native English speakers or native-like speakers work with me. They are very fluent readers. However, their main need is comprehension. So we work on strategies for that. I agree with Stephanie. Thanks for chatting about norms and routines in the TIF. That is so true. And the students create a group. They have a little mini class every week. And I just hear wonderful things. I ask the students the next day, how did their fluency goes? How did the group go? And they tell me it went well. Sometimes they'll bring up vocabulary. And they brought up microphones. So that's how we had the norm that everyone had to turn off their microphone or mute it while another person is reading.
I think one thing Heather has done really well is communication with the volunteers to keep them engaged and active and giving them feedback whenever the students do. And she hasn't felt, she's been okay with letting them know when they're not doing it exactly right. And we have training for our volunteers, and we want fluency groups especially to be a certain way. And students have expectations of what it's going to be like, and they want to hear that fluent reader. And so Heather has been very good with communication with those volunteers. And we have a daytime teacher who does these very similar groups during the day. And it was a process getting everybody trained into our online program, but it's definitely paid off. And but the teacher having that relationship with those volunteers is key.
Thanks for that shout out. And the volunteers also went through the Literacy Minnesota volunteer training for fluency groups. So they already had a lot of that background. I didn't have to tell them. I send out the PDF so they have that passage for each of the reading levels. I do that the day before. It is a little bit of work on my end, but the payoff on the students' end by far outweighs any sort of planning that I need to do. It is a lean, mean machine we've got running now that we can do this 2 years online. Krista, I think we're doing quite well. So Krista's going to show a video. This is our volunteer, Mary Jo. Now, Mary Jo has been leading fluency groups since 2017. So she used to come in person. She volunteered to move online. She told me during COVID, this was what kept her sane because she loves working with our learners. She also participated in the volunteer training. She's an exceptional volunteer. I think she's a teacher. Krista, you would agree. She does really great work. And I think by day, she is an editor. So she does a lot of work in magazine editing.
And what it protects and what it doesn't. So this is really interesting. With the first group, I thought there were a couple things I wasn't really clear about that, or didn't remember from when I learned it. Augustine, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us tonight. Glad to have you on board. Okay, what the First Amendment protects and what it doesn't. U.S. Capitol Police arrest hundreds of protesters after they occupied the center steps of the east front of the U.S. Capitol to demonstrate against the confirmation of Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh, October 6, 2018 in Washington, D.C. See that happening right there. The First Amendment is just 45 words. It's still baffling to lawmakers and judges 227 years later. The government can't choose an official religion, yet federal, state, and local officials can open meetings with a prayer. Abdi, can you take those first two paragraphs?
Yeah. The First Amendment is just 45 words. It is still baffling to lawmakers and churches 227 years later. The government can't choose an official religion, yet federal, state, and local officials can open meeting with a prayer.
Yes, very good, thank you. Any words there or ideas there?
Yeah, for me, what that means?
Yes, very good. Baffling. Hi, Martha. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Baffling means if it's
Hello.
something that you don't. Martha, can you hear me? Can you hear Martha?
Okay, I think they get the gist of that. You'll notice how the volunteer is greeting and being interrupted and kids yelling. It's a perfect example of what online learning is like for all of us.
And Mary Jo does exactly what we want happening in our fluency group. She's modeling that reading fluently with students and then having them reread. So it reinforces what we do in the classroom. It's just reinforced in the smaller groups on a Tuesday. And again, the students are put into those fluency levels depending on that DRA. So the student that you heard, their fluency level was at a 5 or 6. For those of you who haven't done this, 8 would be a native-like speaker, 8 and above. So these are students who are probably in the more middle range. So we put out some resources that we have used at Minneapolis Adult Education that helps for fluency. You can see Newsela. Right now, I believe still during the pandemic, you have free access, at least I do, to look at differentiated levels, topics. I focus right now on social studies topics, but if you have a lower level class or if you're on science, there's other topics. We also bought this middle reading called nonfiction reading practice. It's an Evan Moore e-book. So we purchased the e-book, which gives you rights to make copies. And when we had in-person learning, we made copies so that students at different tables working with a volunteer could read. And there's different levels within those topics. We also have printed off the reading skills for today's adults. And for some of our higher levels, we have used 6-way paragraphs, although I find that the reading passages are a little bit shorter, so you might have to go through it a few times. We do have links to these resources in the resource list that we're sharing with everyone throughout this institute in a shared folder. Do you want to add anything about resources, Krista?
I was just thinking, if you're doing fluency, some of you said that you were, what resources you're using for that practice. If you're just using the normal, reading materials in your class, or are you differentiating between levels? Just curious. Do you want to put that in the chat?
Okay. So Kirsten says, do you have all the groups go through the comprehension questions? It really depends on the group. What we tell the volunteers is comprehension questions are not the aim of the groups, but it's really fluency. So if there's time, they can get to it. But I usually say, what I really want you to do is read the passage 2 times to get them that fluency practice. And if they want to go in and do the comprehension questions, they can go and do it in Schoology. Does anyone else use different resources for fluency? Leveled Lexile levels, yeah, ReadWorks. There can be some different levels in ReadWorks. Kirsten, I haven't found as much as I have in Newsela. So we can move on. I'm not sure if we have time for a brain break, but could we just listen to a few moments of mindful breathing? What do you think? I love it.
I was just wondering, we do have quite a bit to get through. So if you feel like you need a break, please jump up and stretch, but I'll play a minute of it just for you guys, Susan. This one's great.
Breathing. Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. take a few deep breaths. While you're breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face, your hands, and your legs. Let go of all the tightness in your body. Now bring your...
All right, Heather.
mindful
Deep breaths.
breathing.
Whoops, sorry. All right, now into comprehension.
This is why we do it, right? I'm not going to sing though.
So reading comprehension involves a reader's ability to connect words, sentences, and ideas from a reading and understanding the author's intended meaning. Comprehension strategy instruction helps students become purposeful, active readers who are in control of their own reading comprehension. And if a student is a struggling reader in fluency, they can identify when they're stuck on words where they lose the comprehension. They know where they're getting stuck and they know when they're getting stuck. And many students get very frustrated. So that's another way that we just engage students in the process, is using those kind of examples and really showing them that the benefits of reading fluently, reading orally, as much as they can.
Yeah, Krista, it is apparent. Students know that they're stuck with comprehension. So again, we're back to routines, routines, routines. And many of us use graphic organizers. However, my comprehension strategy is that I tell them why I'm having them use a graphic organizer. I tell them right here, this is an example of what I put in my slide deck. While reading the passage, take notes about the amendments to the US Constitution and what they mean. Taking notes is a comprehension strategy to help you stay focused on the text, organize your thoughts and ideas while reading, and help and to have you engage more with the text. So I'm very explicit at why. One of my supervisors is here, Kelly. And Kelly, this is where we nerded out the other day about our TVM lessons, where I'm trying to incorporate these graphic organizers within them. I'm not going to look at them. I tell them this is not for me because I know what those 10 amendments are in the Bill of Rights, but this is for you. And then I want them to go that extra step. What does it mean to you? Just so that they're not copying directly from the text, but what does it mean? I want them to organize their thoughts and ideas connected with the text. So we've been focusing a lot on graphic organizers. I'm thinking you all do as well, but it's that routine of telling them why we're doing it. Some other comprehension strategies I've included is building routines. I'm going to ask students after every paragraph, let's take a moment and reflect. Did you understand it? What was the main idea of that paragraph? Perhaps they could summarize. This is especially helpful for my native English students who might read fluently, but they're going so fast, I don't know how they can even keep up with their thoughts. They're reading so quickly. So we would just say, let's look at this one paragraph. What's the main idea? Underline the main idea or paraphrase it. So it's getting them to pause and really think about what they are reading and engaging. Some other strategies, and you're going to get used to me saying routine, 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 is I'm asking students to determine the evidence in a passage. So again, it's going back to the texts and the pieces of words that are connecting, making those ideas. That is how they're going to connect it to their comprehension. So they have to go back to that passage and find it. Students tell me, wow, I never thought this worked, but it does help them with comprehension. I'm sure some of you might be doing the same sort of thing, but again, it's being that explicitly telling them why it's important so that they're helping themselves with the comprehension. Some other routines that I've done is asking students to identify key details to support the understanding that they might have. So in this case, it's really kind of vocabulary, grievances, but I'd like to have them. That's a detail, but what does grievance mean? You don't have to look in the dictionary. You're stumped maybe, and you forget about everything else, but in that passage, there's evidence telling you what grievance means. So it is a really great comprehension strategy. So we're going to go back to comprehension, and we decided to keep it focused on our fluency groups because, again, we do mix fluency and comprehension on our Tuesday groups. We spend approximately 40 minutes every Tuesday evening. I have 2 classes back to back, so the volunteers are there at their home helping students in one group, and then they maybe go have a cup of tea, and then they come back and help another group of students. This is, again, Mary Jo, and these students in this group have comprehension between 4 and 6 based on the DRA that Krista gave the students.
Right, let's watch this video.
Okay, which selection from the article helps the reader understand why the press is free to write about President Trump? So why is the press able to write about him and not get in trouble is really what this question is asking. The First Amendment does not protect the government's speech though. B, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media sites can take down posts on their websites. The government does not have that right though. C, the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment protects statements about public officials. Or D, the government can say it would threaten national security. The First Amendment gives them the right to publish it anyway. So why can, which one really shows us why we can write about President Trump if we want to? What's A, B, C, or D? Okay, I'll give you the answer. Oh, Augustine is typing. Maybe he wants to. D, he says D. Does everybody agree with that? You're close, but if
I think it's D. I thought C or D. I don't know.
Which ones, Kadra?
I confused.
It is actually C.
Oh.
The Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment protects.
Sorry, I said C.
Did you say C? Okay, thank you, Kadra. Sorry about that. To write about public officials. He is a public official. He's a government. As president, he works for the government. And when they work for the government, they're called public officials. So that one's a hard one sometimes because we get caught up in that word, the phrase public official.
I think we'll stop there just for time's sake. But I want to emphasize in this, this group in particular really is working on fluency. And so when it comes to the comprehension part of it, it's usually the last 10 minutes if they have time to go through the questions, and their emphasis is on the fluency part. And so they're not building those routines and strategies, or Mary Jo's not doing that as necessarily going back to the text, finding those things just for timing, and that the emphasis for her time is that reading fluency.
Thanks for pointing that out, Krista. I'll say when I'm working with the higher leveled and higher level for fluency students, I find most of the time we have to focus on what is the question asking. Before we even determine an answer, I ask the students to tell me, to summarize what is that question asking, paraphrase it, to make sure that they're understanding the question. I find most of the students are not even understanding what the question is asking. And so they're just choosing, I don't know what it's asking. I'm just going to choose C, and it's random, it seems. And some of you might have that sort of thing happening in the classroom, or they don't understand, like Mary Jo pointed out, what a public official is. Mary Jo also gives a lot of thought time so that students aren't answering right away. We do that in our online class with polls. These are some of the resources that we have used in Minneapolis adult education for comprehension. Again, I go back to Newsy LA. We go back to that Eben Moore nonfiction reading practice, because there are those comprehension questions after. Reading skills for today's adults through Marshall. And then we also use 6-way paragraphs. So you might say, hey, didn't you just show those for fluency? But it is what's happening. The one in the bottom left is that one from Evan Moore. I'll let you know that years ago when I first started with STAR, I was part of the STAR 2014 group. We didn't have any readers in my program. So I went to the Learning Store, which you guys, I think that's what it's called, you might know, out in the West End here in the Twin Cities. And I bought some books that said that I could reproduce them. I could make photocopyable copies for my students. And then we looked online and found these e-readers. So it seems to help. You have to really scan the text carefully to make sure there's not the Care Bears and such for lower level elementary and middle school.
And one thing that Heather does really well is the students in her groups, they have access to the article. And so they can go back to it after fluency groups are over, and they can do the questions, they can ask, and reread it. And so that's just another way providing the materials a second time so that they can focus then back onto those comprehension strategies.
Yes, and Mary Jo has a great strategy herself. Students read the questions twice. That is so that they're thoroughly understanding what is being asked. Exactly.
And this Mary Jo is not to be confused with our Mary Jo.
Yes, okay. I haven't used Common Lit, and that is because I went to a session, I think last year, and it's just another platform that I have to learn. Newsy LA just is so easy for me to download, because again, I'm looking at fluency and comprehension at the same time. But it is something I could have. Have you ever done the same text 2 times in a week? Oh yes, we do the same text sometimes 3 times in a week, because I just want to make sure that they are understanding the content, but I am focused on fluency as well. So we do sometimes focus, and they'll say, oh, we already did it. And I'm like, yeah, but today we're looking at something different. We're going to be looking at maybe the main ideas instead of just reading it fluently.
And I would say sometimes if you had more days, like our daytime teachers just have more hours with their classes, and they're generally doing STAR group, fluency groups twice a week. And so then sometimes they do the same article and they just look at it differently, like Heather was saying with her class text. But I think the main thing is that they're in their groups at their reading levels. And so then they have access to something at their reading level later that they can go through too.
Yeah, and Katie, it's great to have you here. I used to work with Katie, but right now I'm teaching social studies, which lends itself to pretty much all nonfiction. However, before I would teach a month of social studies, then a month of science, then a month of RLA content, which is really confusing for the students. But when we did RLA, what I focused on was then some fiction to bring some of that fiction pieces in. Yeah, so again, a lot of these resources can also be found on Atlas. So vocabulary, did any of you attend that amazing vocabulary session that Christine Kelly did this morning? I don't think we need to go here, but because I'm going to say go back and watch that video. She did a great job. So Krista, do you want to tell us why we do vocabulary?
Right. This is why we do it.
This is why we do it.
So vocabulary is key to reading comprehension, and readers cannot understand what they're reading without knowing what most of the words mean. Research on vocabulary instruction reveals that most vocabulary is learned indirectly, and that some vocabulary, academic vocabulary, must be taught directly or explicitly. I think it's good to note, and I think Christine agreed in her session this morning, and I would do another plug to go back and listen to that one. If you haven't yet, she was going from 10 words to 5 words and then to 3, right? And I know that Heather has done a lot of work also making sure that she's not doing too much or not doing too little. So let's hear from you, Heather, about your strategy.
And a lot of the strategies go back to the STAR. And when I went through my STAR training, Christine actually was my STAR trainer, and Penny Brown. And at the time, our program, one of our program managers was there, and he was sold on it. He was just like, oh my gosh, this is great. We have to get it. And in our program, we had a lot of teachers attend STAR. It is amazing. This is an image that Katie Bunkers Mendoza, a woman who used to work in our program, a teacher, and Krista and I worked on in PLC, because we wanted to make sure students understood why we do what we do in class, not just because the teacher said so. So we explain the reason that we are focused on vocabulary strategies. And Katie made the steps to STAR success. And when I point this out to a lot of students, they're like, oh yeah, that's me. I need comprehension, or I need vocabulary, or I need fluency. So the students are able to see where they fall on the steps to comprehension and STAR success. It has worked really well. And by having our morning, afternoon, and evening teachers all focus on the same content language and the same strategies, it has really helped. I also build routines and explain why I'm focusing on tier 2. I like to bring in humor, like I don't need you to teach you how to say, where's the bathroom? You already know that, but tier 2 is the words that are not common words used in conversation. I pointed out to my native English speakers that it is like learning a second language. And I use myself as an example, that I had to learn these words before I went into college so that I could be successful in college. So again, just trying to bring along the native English speakers, because those ELs are just going to want all vocabulary, but I have to get that buy-in from my native English speakers.
Sorry, Heather. Something to note, it's the DRA no longer, it's not recommended. You don't have to do that as part of your DRA routine. So it does save you some time when you're just focusing on the alphabetics, fluency, and comprehension. With a lot of data, Marn and the STAR leadership team were able to come to the conclusion that all students need vocabulary. And I think Heather, using that knowledge that everybody needs it, we need it for them to be successful on their HSE exam and for college prep, that we don't individualize vocabulary instruction any longer.
Thanks for pointing it out. And what you see is what I show students on my whiteboard, my smartboard. I am very explicit. I tell them why. Why would I hide it? I build routines. We focus on syllabication. So let's break down. Tell me how many syllables. Put it in the chat. And then I have students, if I was in person, maybe one day we'll go back to in person, I would have them come up to the whiteboard and mark off where we put those syllables. Some other strategies, Krista, if you move on, I build routines. I teach the vocabulary. I don't try to have them guess at all. And this is a STAR strategy. I don't want them to guess wrong, and I don't want them to hear someone else's guess that's wrong. So I tell them, this is it. This is from my slide deck. I give them the meaning. I want them to see the multiple meanings that this word could have. And then I give them the word family. If you go to the next slide, when I'm teaching, I'm having students focus on synonyms and antonyms. And that was what Christine brought out in her session. Synonyms, synonyms, synonyms. I can't do enough with synonyms. So we work on synonyms. And then I'm giving the students some examples of the sentences in context. These are my sentences, or I grab them off the internet. But I want them to see it within that social studies context, but also perhaps in a real world context, or in a science context, or RLA or math, depending on that vocabulary word. So I'm building routines by giving the students scaffolded opportunities to use that target language. I tell them it's not their word until they use it. So they either will say a sentence, or they'll type it in the chat, or they'll give me a word that's in that can be part of that sentence frame. And I say once they have that, then they're using the word, it's their word. And it is this language of power. So these are all routines. I then also want the students to self-assess the target vocabulary. So I've been doing this for a number of years. So they have to type in the chat, or if we were in class, they would just hold up what number they are. But I'm having them think about how much they understand the word. I tell them I would not be a great teacher if everyone said a 3, because then they're only understanding half of it. So we focus on ways to help and support each other. And students are used to this. And then another routine is review. So it's not one and done with teaching. I show them sentences, like here's an example, and they choose if I'm using it correctly or incorrectly in context, so that the students are thinking about that word. Yeah, Susan, the self-reflection I've been using it for not just vocabulary, but for understanding text passages and many things in the classroom. So I'm trying to just build in so many routines, and then it's so much easier to prep. I think I've got one more routine I have here. So the resource, well, no, I think that was it. Sorry, I cut away a slide for time. But we have quite a few resources. One thing that I always go to is located on the Atlas website, and it's that Susan Finn Miller's vocabulary workouts. She gave it to us for free. There's 100 academic vocabulary words. I use this to model the work that I do now in my classes. So it is a great strategy. It is on our resource list. When I went through STAR, there was this here, words to learn by. However, we had to have a book for every student, and they're kind of expensive. So I went back to Susan Finn Miller's because it was free. And then you can use this website where you can put in the text and it will highlight the academic vocabulary words. So you're going to talk about persistence.
All right, so we want students engaged in this process. Many of the things that Heather is pointing to in conversation or building those routines, we want students to be persistent and engaged. And so one thing that we've been doing for a number of years is getting feedback from them at the end of the year. And we do a Google Form survey with students and send that out to them. We want to know that the time and effort that Heather is putting in, volunteers are putting in, and as students are engaged in that process, that there is, they're giving us feedback on that and information to help us change or adapt or just getting what they need. So this is just a little bit of data from our 2020. The responses are a lot less than you'll see on the next slide. Just everybody knows what happened. Or no, this was 2021 results. So the end of last year.
But it included part of 2020. So it would have been the academic school year.
We want to know if their start time, you know, those fluency groups and those comprehension groups are improving their reading skills. And you can see an overwhelming yes. And I use reading strategies I've learned when. We want to know that they're using it not just to understand the things happening in that moment, but where can it be applied to their outside life. Yeah, just for engagement and persistence. And it's just another one from 2017 when we were a little larger. Our STAR EBRI classes were across program and across day and evening, and same, very similar results. Many students are engaged and happy in those in that time. So.
Yeah, and to me, it points out why we do STAR. Mm-hmm. The students want it, they need it, and they love it.
Yes. So we have resources and tools. That's all going to be linked in our resource page. And then also just wanted to give another plug for the upcoming EBRI webinar. Like I said, this will go into deeper each of those topics. And there's some videos of the DRA that we've done in the past with Marn, looking at students and scores and all of that. And so you'd be able to walk through all of those steps together as in this webinar. So I hope that you can attend if you're able.
And something that is not on the slide, but it's in the resource list, is there is a new links, which is the OCTAE, or the U.S. Department of Education's Professional Development for Adult Education Teachers. There's a new course on teaching reading to adults at, I think, a beginning, intermediate, and advanced level. This is something that is done nationwide, and I believe you can get some CEUs. So it is a great new program on links. So we want to know, are you ready to create that spark or the sparkle in your classroom? So what number would correspond to you? So a 1 would be, yes, I'm ready to use some strategies, or 2, I'm just about there, really depending where you are. And I'm just going to do a shout out. Tomorrow, Krista is going to lead the STAR EBRI coffee break. It's another opportunity for you to talk about these strategies, bring in your resources, share with your colleagues. So what sort of number would you put in the chat, friends? Thanks. I see the number 1s. Oh, Kelly, I love the stars, because I call Krista a superstar, and the volunteers. So great.
So here's our contact information. We would love to answer any questions you have. We are making those videos shareable at this point, but if we would love to just chat about like how we train and how we incorporate all these different things of STAR and EBRI into our life in Minneapolis. So if you have any questions, I can stay for a little bit. I'd be happy to do that. And Gail has posted about the affinity groups. If you would like to join those, that is there. But any last minute thoughts? We are right at 3:45.
This is how we do it. Hey, Aaron's here. I see, oh, Rachel is here too. I couldn't see who was all here. And Sherry, thanks. It can be done online. All right.
Katie, that is that EBRI webinar. I'll just post it. It's also attached in the resource. It's, I think there's a link for it, right? We put a link on there.
I put a link, and it's also in Atlas, the events, and you can check for the links, LINCS. It's also in our resource list.
Yeah, and CEUs are available. And honestly, like most people I talk to, we've hosted quite a few study circles through the years in Minneapolis, and most people are like, hands down, like I was not educated enough on teaching reading, and it is really helpful stuff. And like I said, Marn will be there and doing it, so it'd be good to get the expert in the room. Oh,
yes.
Thanks, Susan.
And thanks, Susan and Gail, for hosting us and co-hosting. Yeah, Krista, STAR changed my teaching strategies. It really transformed what I do in the classroom for teaching reading.
I agree.